If Governor Ehrlich was lamenting his role in the speaking order, how do you think I feel? I want to really commend Commissioner Carrick and Lamont for your very eloquent remarks, and I'll be very brief since we're running a little bit behind. But I just want to pause for a moment again to acknowledge the powerful statements that preceded me here and say that, as a mom of 3 rambunctious biracial little boys, I do think that this issue is about communities. And, I thank OSF and Nikichi and Andrew for hosting this important event, but really want to commend NACDL and their leadership and staff for this transformative report. I really think that this issue is one that has often been at the margins and through tenacious work of many has been part of the conversation, but I think as we've heard from the speakers today, it's one that really necessitates some action. So with great humility, I'm here on behalf of the Vera Institute of Justice, which, if you're not familiar with us, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's been working for about over 50 years out of our office in New York City, although now our work expands across the country. We do a lot of research, technical assistance, and other demonstration projects around criminal justice reform. And, in thinking about NACDL's report and really having spoken to Norm about it last week, I had a funny experience. I live and work in Northeast DC. Anybody who has seen me in the last few months knows I'm a huge fan of Uber. I think it's just the best thing, right? Anywhere you are, Tuesday night, middle of a thunderstorm, Uber comes and picks me up. And, unfortunately, because it was a storm, I ended up in an Uber black car, the fancy ones, which I try not to take. And so the driver starts chatting with me and says to me, do you like Uber? I said, oh, I love Uber. It's so great. You come and pick us up. It's this great thing in our city where you often can't get a cab. And he says to me, well, do you ever take Uber X, the low-end version? I said, oh, I love that. That's so for me. I work for a nonprofit. And he said, well, you should know. Felons can drive for Uber X. And it really struck me, the gravity of his comment. Because again, going back to the NACDL report and the comments that have been made here this morning, there's a demonization and a real stigma that goes on in our communities. And this goes far beyond the tangible laws that are on our books. It's how we talk about these individuals who live in our communities who have made mistakes. And it also goes to the nature of these far-reaching laws that many state legislatures have passed that prohibit individuals from having employment opportunities when they come back to our communities. When you think about the viciousness of someone saying, this person returning to my community, they shouldn't have a job to drive for Uber. Well, how far can that go? Well, in New York State alone, the laws are so extraordinary, you can't be a bingo caller in New York State if you have a conviction. And I think that really speaks to the magnitude of this problem. It also speaks to the reality that it is so far-reaching that it is almost incomprehensible to grasp the consequences that people face. And again, I think it's been really important today, as the speakers have acknowledged the number of people living in our country that already have criminal convictions. But we also need to think about how that number will continue to grow. We have between 9 to 12 million people leaving jail every year. We have about 1.6 million people who are currently in prison, with 95% of them going to return to our communities at some point in time. These individuals, who many of us may know or may not even know that we know, are around us and trying to live a good life. And I think that this report is particularly important because it highlights some really meaningful recommendations and next steps that can take place. I'd like to also specifically acknowledge some work that the Vera Institute of Justice has been doing, which again is just chipping around the edges, but I think acknowledges where there are some opportunities for additional reform. And again, to emphasize that I think this is a bipartisan issue. As many of you here in the room know well, President Bush was the one that brought up second chances in his State of the Union. And in President Obama, through the creation of his Federal Reentry Interagency Council and the hard work and leadership of Amy Solomon and Ron Ashford there, have really done a lot to try and come up with some tangible ways for both the federal government and state and local governments to pierce these perplexing problems. What we know from the research, because that's where Vera always starts, is that access to housing as well as reunification substantially increases the likelihood that a person returning home from prison or jail will be able to find and retain employment, stay drug-free, and refrain from committing additional crimes. I think we've heard some tangible examples of that reality this morning. We also know that those individuals who have an opportunity to return to housing also have stronger family connections and have a greater opportunity for success in securing and retaining employment. We also know from research that Vera has done over the years that those going into homeless shelters are at a far greater risk of having an opportunity to succeed. So where do we stand today? HUD has been encouraging housing authorities across the country to adopt programs so that individuals released from incarceration can gain access to stable housing. This is such an important mandate. The execution of the mandate has been incredibly challenging. People of color are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, and housing policies that exclude these people have a disparate impact on people of color. HUD's Fair Housing Enforcement Office has made this argument very effectively, and HUD has been issuing important guidance on how criminal background reports should be used. It's really significant that we're moving away from blanket exclusion policies and encouraging individual assessment of applicants. And again, I think that this is an important thing to emphasize in terms of the public safety arguments that are made around a lot of these issues. If we're using individualized assessments, then why do we have mandatory consequences that are across the board? So I'm really proud to announce an important pilot that Vera has launched with our government partner in New York City. We're calling it the NYCHA Project. This pilot program is for individuals who are 16 and up, who have been released from incarceration and would like to return to public housing run by New York City. Right now, we're in the planning and implementation stages of this project. We have gone through a very intensive screening process so that 150 individuals who will have the opportunity to reunite with their families during a trial 2-year period. Now again, we're talking about 150 individuals compared to the magnitude of individuals facing these burdens in our communities. But we do think that this project is important because hopefully it will inspire confidence and leadership for the program to be replicated in other jurisdictions. And what we're also trying to partner with this program is intensive case management services that allow nonprofit providers to ensure stable housing so that these individuals can remain with their families and be stable contributing members of their community. And I think it's really important to think about in the context of even just this individual project that 1 year of probation triggers prohibition to housing in New York City. So we're not even talking about individuals, as was described here, who necessarily have violent offenses. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But what's more important is that there's an individualized process going on. And I also just wanted to briefly mention another project that we're very excited about in New Orleans. There with the Housing Authority, we are launching one of the first programs to allow any individual, regardless of the basis of their conviction, to apply for public housing. Now, unfortunately, there are 2 federal criteria that are mandatory bars that relate to production of meth on a property or sex offenses that will remain statutory bars even within the context of this pilot. But what we are moving forward to do is that with a panel of senior staff conducting individualized assessment of individual situations, looking at criminal history, rehabilitation efforts, community involvement, and creating a screening criteria that we hope becomes a model that can be used in other jurisdictions. Again, this policy became effective in February, and it governs all New Orleans public housing, Section 8 vouchers, and scattered site units throughout the city. It's in mixed income developments, also managed by third-party property managers, so we're trying to also pierce that envelope as well. And it applies for new applicants as well as those returning to existing family households. So we're very excited about this work, and hopefully we'll have more to report to you in the years ahead about this. And then briefly also, I wanted to highlight another example of where we're trying to work with individuals coming back into our communities through positive programs that can really help them navigate the path more successfully. Through private funding, Vera has launched what we call the Pathways to Post-Secondary Education Project. It's supported by the Ford Foundation, Kellogg, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're working right now with 3 states, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Michigan. The important thing to think about, I believe, in the context of this program is that we're starting with individuals 2 years pre-release and then staying with them 2 years post-release. The important criteria for the states to partner with us is that we felt that it was incredibly important that individuals trying to navigate educational opportunities, including post-secondary education, have the support of a mentor working with them as they navigate these difficult processes. Most of us had to go through financial aid applications by ourselves, much less have to deal with that kind of bureaucracy when you're inside of a detained situation, but then also having to navigate that as you're re-entering your communities. So this project has now been picked up in California through support of the LA County Jail and LA Community Colleges, and we hope that it continues to grow. And we're very proud of many of the individuals who have already completed their education as part of this program. Last two quick things I just wanted to foreshadow. One is that in a few months, and where we really hope to build upon the momentum that NACDL is starting today, Vera will be releasing a report around what the states have been doing to correct collateral consequences over the last 6 years. No surprise for many of us working here in Washington that the states are far ahead of the feds in this area. And we're particularly going to examine the use of expungement provisions, different revisions that have happened around licensing, diversion, and family. And again, we hope that this will complement the work that Margie has done with the ABA in terms of the examination of the laws, but then also to look to see where states are already taking a hard look at what can be improved. And then lastly, I just want to, again, acknowledge the problems ahead are so complex, but in thinking outside of the box, in October, Vera released a report about sentencing practices in Germany and the Netherlands. We've gotten a lot of really interesting responses to the report because not everybody does this the American way. And it's something I would encourage all of you to take a look at as we think about, again, how to solve these complex problems. So thank you very much.